Hey, Mark Miller's here. How you doing, my friend? Couple minutes late, but I wanted to get in here and do this, and I'll explain more as more people show up. 858 Bill is in the house. Good morning, sir, and good day to you too, my friend. Although it is afternoon where I'm at. I know people don't like that construction of the sentence. Is my camera pointed a little bit about there? How's that? You getting a little closer? Brian Harr's in the house. Stanley Wong, Manuel Guerra. Hey, Manuel, saw me at the Dream Cruise yesterday. I did not see you, and I apologize. Andy Evans, Mustang MG05. Brett 7284. Jonathan Irwin. Daryl Watts. Mike Torello. Roxin. Douglas Gaxiola. P. Gorson, hello from Caseville, home of the Hamburger Festival, right? Wesley Wren, good audio. Daniel Cortez. Richard Achman. Jones Man. Sup, Steve. Sup, Jones Man. What world famous place are you at today? DePaul's in the house. And Dan Boyd, where you been? Like I said, I'll explain it in a second. TJ Zenson, Piper John, Tyler Pasquale, Chris Garby, Canadian Bacon, Lewis Browning, Professor. Good to see you, my friend. Fred Jabubi, howdy. Brett 7284. Ryan Eastwood, RMC, the Silver Hand 69. You're back. Yay, I assume that's what that means. Robert Torrey, the teacher's tardy. Where's your note? Greatest thing ever. I had a law professor one day walk into class late, and somebody jokingly said, "You're late." And he says, "Says who?" And they go, "The clock." He turns around, he reaches up, and he moves the hand of the clock back, and he goes, "No, I'm on time." Chuck Whitehead checking in from Jonesboro. Randall Spencer's in Hope, Arkansas. Norman Hardiak from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Johnny Quest's on the banks of the Mississippi River. Tim Lamewoman, hello. Daniel Kester is here. And Daniel, I saw you sent me a message as I was just firing everything up. And I'm like, I hope he sees this. Steve Ladner, do you own stock in the Hertz? No, a better question is if I shorted the stock of Hertz, and I've not done that either. But yeah, I don't dabble in rental car company stock. Oh. Isaac Bob York said, I saw the finally and thought maybe they did something useful like outlawed civil asset forfeiture. Canadian Bacon never caught a live stream before. Happy to be here. I'm glad you're here too. Aaron Freeman, you on this week? Well, I am now. So I missed a few Sundays in a row, and I apologize. The last live stream I did, I ended by saying, well, I'll be here next week, but then I've got some things coming up, such as the Troy Traffic Jam, and I misread my calendar. And the next Sunday was the Troy Traffic Jam, and that's on Sunday. So I missed that one because I was at the Troy Traffic Jam. And then I had a project at my house. And I needed help from one of my brothers, and my brother has a job. I've got a job. And so for us to get together usually means a Saturday or a Sunday. And just so happens to be that it was Sunday. So 2 of those Sundays were tied up because my brother could only be here on a Sunday. So anyway, I'm here now. And he was actually here this morning. He literally just left. And I looked at the clock and I said, hey, I can get in there and start a live, and I'll only be a few minutes late. So here we are. But, you know, a lot of people are here. NY Outcast says, I'm checking in from the shower. Keep it clean. Yeah, don't get electrocuted either. Duncan Campbell from Melbourne, Australia. Just to let you know, I saw a show not too long ago with Men at Work. And, of course, they are from down under. Fred Jabubi, is the lemon law business booming? Yeah, it is. It's not because of recalls. Recalls rarely play into that, but it's usually just the cars are too complicated. Moss 8541. Finally, what? Finally, I'm doing a live stream, and I'll change the title when I'm done. But finally, in the sense that I've missed, I think 3 weeks in a row, and people are starting to get upset. So I'm here. Dan Boyd says you could have gone live from the Troy Traffic Jam. The problem with going live for me is I need to be able to read the comments. I don't think I could read the comments on a cell phone from a distance. And if I had it too close, what's the purpose of being there? So did not do that. I did put up a video. I put a link to it on my Facebook page. And also I think I plugged it in the comments, or not the comments, but the memo on YouTube. But I did a couple interviews from My TV, and they took 4 of them and put them together. And the 4th interview is me talking to Mark Lieberman about my Cobra. So many people complain about me not talking enough about my Cobra. I'm like, okay, well, I'll do one of these with Mark Lieberman with a walk around and a separate cameraman, and we covered a lot of ground in that video. Mark Miller, are there any recalls on your new Explorer? No, I don't think so. I haven't gotten any notices. Scott Summers checking in, says hello. Duncan Campbell says men at work are, in fact, from Melbourne. Neighbors. We come from a land down under. One of the greatest songs ever. That ought to be the national anthem of Australia. I wish there's a song that cool from America about America. I don't know that there is. Am Radko, Dave from Denver. Mike Leah says, you're a popular guy. Well, it's kind of funny. I did go to the Woodward Dream Cruise yesterday. Manuel Guerra, who checked in a few minutes ago, took a photograph of me in my car from about 100 yards away and sent me it and said, hey, Steve, I saw you in traffic today. I got recognized a bunch of times. If you've never been to the Dream Cruise, it is a marvel. It is unbelievable. It's indescribable. It's a car show that takes place over about 15 miles of road with hundreds of thousands of people there, bumper to bumper, and cars parked along the side. I saw 12 or 15 DeLoreans in one spot. I saw 50 or 60 Cobras from the Motor City Cobra Club. I didn't stop because I was just driving around, and I wound up getting so overheated because it was so hot. It was insanely hot yesterday. So, Daniel Kester, I enjoyed the video with you driving your Cobra. I posted a couple of those. Calfani Ken Jenkins says, America the Beautiful by Ray Charles. Well, no, that's a beautiful song, a beautiful rendition, and I agree, but I'm just talking about a pop group putting out a song that just so well encapsulates something as well as down under. So, Dan Boyd, if you ended up buying a lemon, would you represent yourself in that case? Oh, no. I would just hand it off to one of my many friends in the field and say, get me my car bought back. Manuel Guerra, it's a beautiful car. Well, from the distance you saw it at, yeah. No, actually, it still looks good up close. Matthias says your T-shirt is still stuck with the U.S. Postal Service. I got the news. It's still on its way. Yeah, thank you for checking in. I've been checking. In fact, I told my postmaster, a good friend of mine now, that I'm waiting for a package from Germany. He's got his eyes peeled for it. Sandra Jones, my sons have gone to that. Brock Dowling checking in from Sioux Falls. Sandra Jones, have a wonderful time at the car shows. Yeah, I don't go to that many, but there's just 2 every year. It's the Troy Traffic Jam, which is on a Sunday. And then usually about 2 weeks later on a Saturday is the Woodward Dream Cruise. And Woodward Dream Cruise has been going on now for about 25 or 30 years. It's been a while. The Enterprise, which broadcast mics are you using? I'm using a single microphone. It is this one. It is an Electro Voice RE20. And if you look back there, you'll see another Electro Voice RE20. I like them so much, I bought 2 of them. They use them in a lot of radio stations and television stations, studios for voiceover work. Mark Miller, didn't Neil Diamond do a song about America? Yeah, was it Coming to America? 858 Bill, Born in the USA by Bruce. I'm familiar with it, but to me, I don't know. I always thought that song was a little bit too, I don't know. It's kind of like he wrote the song in an attempt to do that. Daryl Watts, where is the Dream Cruise located at? It is on Woodward Avenue. And Woodward Avenue is one of the main spurs that comes out of Detroit, downtown Detroit. And it's marked by mile roads all the way up to about 20 Mile Road. And then it does a loop in Pontiac. And so the Woodward Dream Cruise is basically from about 12 mile or 11 mile up to the loop. And some sections of it get so congested that I got onto Woodward and came down and was doing the loop through Royal Oak and got basically stuck in bumper to bumper to bumper traffic. It was insane. But every car near you is cool. You're looking around like you can't, it's like, whoa, you name any car. There are more of them there than you could shake a stick at. I probably saw a dozen winged cars. I probably saw, like I said, 20 or 30 DeLoreans. And then all kinds of really cool custom stuff, hot rods, street rods, you name it. It's there, and so it's cool. But the only problem is I was in my Cobra, obviously no air conditioning. It's an open top car. I'm just sitting there and it was bright sunlight. It was close to 90 degrees and it was humid and I was cooking, just cooking. And at one point, I stopped, hit a gas station, bought a couple Gatorades and a water, just slugging this stuff down. And about 3 o'clock, I said, you know something, I can't take it anymore, and headed home and took a shower and cooled off. And I mean, the Dream Cruise goes until about 9 o'clock at night when they shut it down. I've been out there before at night. It tends to get crazier as the day goes on, but you see all kinds of stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But I had probably more than a dozen people recognize me, and I had about 50 or 75 people yelling to me, "Oh my God, I love your car." That Cobra's reactions that I get to that car are unbelievable. So now I'm having a little issue with the hydration. I was just working outside with my brother. Hobie Jackson just got here, better late than never. That's okay. We started late. Oh, Vinny Sluga, my dog has cancer. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh boy, it stopped moving on me. I realize now I'm falling way behind. Oh, Daryl Watts says I asked because I live in Oklahoma. I didn't know where it was located. If you do a Google search for like the largest car shows in America, the Woodward Dream Cruise will always be up there because it is so huge. It's been going on for so long. I mean, there's corporate sponsors now. Chevrolet puts this huge display in Birmingham, and Ford does this huge Mustang display down in Berkeley. It's you could get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you could try to see as much of it as you could, and you'd barely scratch the surface. You actually have to plan it in advance as to what you want to see if you want to see something. So, Mark Miller, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. Well, actually, it's both. Sandra Jones is checking out. She's got a headache. I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. Lay down, do what you can to stay cool. Although today it's a little bit cooler than it was yesterday. Enterprise, can you explain what a Michigan left turn or U-turn traffic setup is all about? There's a thing called a Michigan left. And so what happens is if you're coming up and you're crossing over a divided highway or a divided avenue, you don't turn left at the divide. What you do is you actually make a right turn and you go down and turn around and then you go straight. And it keeps it from happening where you have gridlock at the lights. And there's some places I know of that did not have Michigan left for the longest time. When they put one in, it fixed everything. I'm not sure which other states have them, but I often hear them referred to as a Michigan left. So S. Gutog says, when you gave an example of a bank robber and you called the guy in the story Bob, was that a nod to Bill Cosby's routine regarding his Cobra? No, although I'm familiar with that now that you mention it, but I simply didn't want to keep using John or, typical stuff, Bob, but whatever. Zach, I remember going to Woodward Dream Cruise as a kid and seeing a monocycle. Even an engine powered unicycle? That would be mind blowing. Oh boy. I have a slight tickle in my throat. I don't have a mute. Oh boy. Well, we'll see how it goes. Have you ever met Dennis Gage? Is he the guy with the curly Q mustache? Yes. I met him at a car show in Alabama a few years back. TJ Zenson, do you have a legal story to share? Or are you just giving your addicted audience their fix? Well, I don't have any stories unless you can suggest one or have a question. But just don't ask, do you have a good story? I got a lot of those. Oh boy. Andrew Zupke, hello, all you beautiful people. I think the key is, hang on, I think I figured it out. Hang on. I think the key is that I don't want to look up. I think looking up somehow tightens something in here. Is Alethea in the house? I saw somebody saying hi, Alethea. I hope she is. Good friend of ours. Marina Corps. Have you heard about the eminent domain case in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, where the town bulldozed the house before paying or transferring the deed? Couple still paying the mortgage. I had not heard about that one. I'll look it up. Ram 50 V8. Hello, Steve. Leaving Champaign, Illinois, and driving back to Arkansas. So that's a bit of a hike, isn't it? Oh, I guess if you're leaving Champaign heading to North Arkansas, maybe not so bad. Well, believe it or not, the motorcycle, the guy sits inside of it. There was also a car, a show vehicle called the Hallucination, which is a Hemi-powered unicycle that some guy actually built and brought to car shows back in the 60s. Mark A. made it to Detroit last weekend for the first time in at least a decade. Stayed downtown, had an absolute best time. Amazing to see the renaissance Detroit has been going through lately. Yeah, downtown Detroit's been really cleaned up. It's safe. A lot of good stuff going on down there, and they are slowly restoring it. You know, it takes decades for a town to fall apart. It takes decades to bring it back. Becca, Maine, always good to chat with a fellow Finn. Well, thank you for checking in, fellow Finn. KN Ooster, New Jersey has used them since the mid-70s, but I'm guessing you probably don't call them Michigan left, right? Ram 50 V8, 476 miles from where he's going to where he's getting to. 476 miles. So I drove a couple weekends ago. I went up north to Copper Harbor, and that's about, I think, about 500-mile drive. It's a hike. It's a hike. Bill G, how is a case determined to be frivolous? Well, frivolity is usually when a case has no basis in fact or law. The question is, what does no basis mean? It's up to a judge. I'm telling you, it's nothing there. It's just a feeling, but I don't know if I can. I'll try to go as long as I can here. Peter Sentinello just made a great video on the Upper Peninsula. I've had several people send it to me, but I've not seen it yet. I will one of these days. Pa Rump, Mike, what do you think of the newest generation of Corvettes? I actually like them. I like them. I'm not a Corvette guy, but I like them. Let's try Gatorade, see if that helps. I didn't have time to mix this. Maybe it's because it's unmixed. We'll drink some straight Gatorade. Hang on. Let's see now. I think that helps somehow. JBMCB, unrelated. Why are there so many law offices on 10 Mile Road in Southfield, Michigan? I don't know. There's a couple different places where there's a lot of concentrations of them. I know that Jeffrey Feiger's office is on 10 Mile. He's got a pretty big office and he's pretty well known. Maybe it's because people want to be near him. CE, love the accent, Steve. Darth Ed 2023, can you tell us about the gaming terms of service, or do you know anything about that, please? Well, I don't consider myself an expert on terms of service for games, so I don't know what you want me to tell you about it. Elatheus is maybe rest your throat for a bit, then come back. No. I'm here. I'm a warrior. Ram 50 V8. I watched a Corvette get totaled right in front of my shop. Blew through a stoplight last week. Oof, it's tough. Situation money. Someone keeps breaking into my car. Can I set up a booby trap in the car if I have a warning sign in the window? I would not recommend it. Depends on your state law. I did a video a couple years back about booby traps in houses, and the law is basically the same with a car. And the thinking is that it could injure somebody who's innocent. But, it's a crying shame that it does keep happening. 116-3562. Hello. Did you enjoy the Dream Cruise? Yeah, until I overheated and had to leave. Douglas Bolin, how do you mix Gatorade? I often bring a thermos on the live streams with me, and I mix it 50-50. I take one of these waters, and I take one of these Gatorades, and I mix it and drink them during the course of the show. So, TJ Zenson, do you still litigate, or does this give enough money now that you don't have to step into a courtroom anymore? I do still practice law. Yes. Lewis Browning, let's discuss the mail to the wrong law office address. At the end of every single video, I have 2 title screens, one of which says, please send all correspondence to this address. And there's an address and it's a P.O. box. And I also recently put a thing up that says, do not contact my law office about videos on YouTube. And for some odd reason, people call my office, they leave me messages going, hey, Steve, and I'll get them like 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, Steve, I'm in Idaho. I got a problem with a next door neighbor. Can you help me? No, I don't practice law in Idaho. I'm licensed in Michigan only, and all I do is lemon law. That's it. I can't help you. I did a whole video about that. But people also keep mailing stuff to my office. I've said, please don't do that. I wanted to make sure you got it. I have explicit instructions that say, send it here. Why would you send it there? To make sure I got it when I told you to send it here. I mean, so. Darth Ed 2023, how do you stop them from selling your information? Who? You mean the people who just scrape that stuff up and sell it? CyberDoc, who leaves their phone on at 3 a.m.? Who shuts office phones off? Ever. I'm talking about an office phone. You know, if you look at my website, there's a phone number. Do you know people who actually shut their phones off at 3 a.m.? Didn't know you could do that. I mean, I suppose I couldn't. No. I'd plug it in and a bunch of stuff would pop in that came in overnight. Autumn Jesserich, if life has taught me anything, et cetera, et cetera. I was kidding. Mitch MC, hello, Stephen, all. Michael Myers, my wife is licensed in NC and Virginia. She gets calls all hours of the day, but does she get them from other states, the other 48? JB Weld, what's the most niche field of law you've seen someone practicing? I'm not making this up. I had someone once call me and go, hey, Steve, I've got a problem in Michigan involving a railroad pension. And I wouldn't even know where to begin. And I had just been flipping through a Lawyer's Weekly magazine, and I saw it in the back an ad for a guy who goes, I specialize in railroad pensions. And I told this woman, I said, here, call this guy. And she goes, he says that's what he does. And she called him. She called me back later. She goes, yeah, the guy settled my case for me. The guy was great. I'm like, okay, so apparently you can specialize in railroad pensions. CyberDoc, well, who in tarnation calls an office phone at 3 a.m.? They do. I will come into my office, turn, and glance at my phone, the light's blinking, and I look at the list of phone calls, and it's like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 8 a.m. And I'm calling you from, Wyoming, and I got a problem with my neighbor. So. Well, Matthias says, after 9 p.m., only registered phone numbers can call me. All others will be sent to voicemail. I'm not talking about my cell phone, though. I'm talking literally about the desk phone, which is a phone that sits on your desk, has a hand set in a cradle, and you can dial out with it. And I understand nowadays these things are all running through the internet and all that, but if you call that number, it's going to ring and you leave a message, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. So. Situation Money, what do you think of the Ford Excursion with a V10? Thinking about getting one for towing a car trailer. I have not heard of that. Is that like a Viper motor, the V10? Native Atheist, what's up? Michael Cole, wait, you still have a landline? Well, no, it's not like with Ma Bell, but it's I do have a telephone. I have a telephone at my office. Okay, I don't know why people go like why do you have a telephone at your office? People call you? Yes, I'm an attorney. Okay, people will call my office and say I bought a defective car. Can you help me? It's called a business phone, as Carl's Corner points out. I'm not crazy to have a business phone. Bill McMahon, hello from my retirement home in Mounds View, Minnesota. Lewis Browning says the V10 Ram truck was junk. I don't know that much about them. I know there's got to be some similarities, obviously, between the engines, between those and Viper motors. So, Michael Myers, my office phone is VoIP. Yeah, so is mine. That's why I refer to it as a desk phone. No matter what I call it, people are gonna get upset. Dumb, is your office phone a rotary? No, but I was in a bar, a restaurant up in the Upper Peninsula in Calumet called the Michigan House. You ever go to Calumet, eat at the Michigan House? Great food, great bar. Bar's been there since like the 1800s, and they have a rotary phone behind the bar. And I actually asked the waitress, the bartender, I said, "Does that phone work?" And she goes, "Yes." I go, "But can you dial it?" She goes, "Yes." But I think it's been modified. So Daniel Kester says there are a few fax machines still being used. Now, I will admit I have a fax number, but haven't had a fax machine in over a decade. But theoretically, people can fax things to my office if they have a fax machine. I haven't faxed something to somebody else, though, in probably a decade or so. Bob Kerflugen's checking in from Gaylord. I'm glad to finally catch you live. Stupid or Turtle says he's a car industry veteran. In sales or in engineering or marketing or what? Terry Lagros Bisson, prospector Terry in Australia. Hi, Steve. Alethea says, bring, bring. I assume she wants me to roll the R to make it sound like a phone, right? Bring, bring. Homestead Helper says it's related to the Viper motor. I think they call it the Iron Viper. All my good engines are made out of aluminum as God intended. Yolan True or Jolan True, hello from Nova Scotia. Yeah, Charles says you're doxxed in a way because people know where you're at and what you do. Unfortunately, it's the way of the world now. Well, and one of the problems, and I don't know if I explain this very often, but one of the problems is, as an attorney in the state of Michigan, I am required to put my real name on anything I do that can be considered advertising. So I could not put up a video and just call myself the Lemon Law Attorney without saying my name. And so my first videos I put up, I put my name in there, and I see attorneys now who don't, and it's one of those things, But I knew it was going to be a potential problem. But again, I don't mind people calling my office if they're in Michigan and they've got a legal problem. But more often than not, I'm coming from a different state, and I got a problem that you don't deal with. Hey, Johnny Knoxville's in the house. Mind Bend, how you doing, Johnny? Good to see you. JB Weld, can you describe the cultural subregions of the great state of Michigan? I'm not really sure that there's a lot of cultural subregions in that sense. The people of the Upper Peninsula, Yoopers, are often considered to be a little different. They do often have a slight accent. There's an argument about where that comes from. And then, of course, it's more if you live in a big city, you live in the country. You got a couple big cities. You got Detroit. You got Grand Rapids. You got the Tri-County area around Detroit, which is pretty much the metropolitan Detroit area. But yeah, it's not that hugely distinctive, I don't think. So, Jay Klein checking in from sunny Cincinnati. Hey, Jay, you missed a great show. Sorry about that. Mark Keppel, how close are you to Frankenmuth? I used to work in Frankenmuth. I was working at a radio station in Saginaw, WKNX, which is an oldies station, and they moved their state, city of license to Frankenmuth, and I went with them. So literally one day they were broadcasting in Saginaw, and the next day they go to Frankenmuth. The studio is set up. And I was broadcasting from Frankenmuth. And Frankenmuth is a tourist trap. It's a little town off of I-75 north of Birch Run, probably about 2 hours north of Detroit, hour and a half, something like that. And it's one of the biggest tourist destinations in Michigan. And they've got a bunch of stuff there, and it's like Bavarian themed. And there is Bronner's, for instance, which is this huge store that sells Christmas stuff. And there's also a couple really good restaurants in town. And so a lot of people do go there. So I would highly recommend it if you do go by the area, swing through and check it out. So Bob Kerflugen, Gaylord's having a small car show this weekend. Yeah, there's a bunch of car shows in places like that. St. Ignace has got a car show in the summer. There's even a car show in Copper Harbor, very tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula. I'd love to go there for it, but it's just so far, and I know I don't know if I want to drive my car all the way up there and risk having to drive through all the different weather and so on. So Johnny Knoxville, I'm going to retire to Frankenmuth. Why not retire to Bad Axe? I did a video that went up on my channel yesterday about the fact that the radio station in Bad Axe is changing hands for the first time in 53 years. And I've gone through there a few times recently. I've not stopped by the station in a few years, and the only people who are left there now that I know, I think, is one guy. But they're changing owners this summer, which is a bizarre thing because they're being sold by a family to a local guy, and that's huge that they're not being bought by some huge corporation. Wade Pittenger, in your radio years, did you do the on-location broadcast or promos? Yeah, you'd call that a remote broadcast. I did some remote broadcasts, not a lot, but I did a few. In fact, I broadcast live from the Huron County Fair, where they would crown the Huron County Bean Queen. And that was a lot of fun. They had a little trailer that they had set up, and you'd be in this little, looked like a fishbowl, and you'd be inside this little trailer with lights on you. And I was on my show was generally from 7 till midnight, but I think I'd be broadcasting from like 7 to 9 or something, 7 to 10, because the fair wouldn't run that late. So Art S says someone in Franklin was rescued and moved some 19th century truss bridges as part of the tourist attraction. Yeah, there's some really cool bridges out there. I knew that. I didn't know where they came from. And likewise, they also have a couple things out there, including an 80s festival I've been to a few times. So 1163562 says, isn't there some legality with having historical plates driving to and from car shows? But you have to understand, different states, the laws are different. In Michigan, they specifically said historic plates can be driven anywhere in the month of August because they're trying to accommodate the Dream Cruise. And so, if I wanted to jump in a car with a historical plate on it, drive anywhere I want right now because it's August. But none of my cars have historic plates on them because I didn't want to limit myself to that. Chris Tope says that Clark Howard did a podcast where he says he'll no longer rent from Hertz. Clark Howard is a syndicated radio host who's he's not an attorney, but he's a consumer advocate, and I wouldn't be surprised. Mark Miller is a former DJ. Did you think the WKRP Turkey Drop episode was hilarious? Oh yeah, it was. It was. And the great thing about it was simply that they used the theater of the mind thing. They didn't actually show turkeys splattering. T-Bone 21. T-Bone, how did you and Ed Bolian meet? I've been on his show. There's 12 or 13 videos with me on his channel, VinWiki. And he actually contacted me. back when I had probably about 100,000 subscribers. And he said, "Hey, Steve, I noticed that you sometimes tell stories on your channel. You want to come down and tell some of mine?" And I said, "Yeah, because quite frankly, I can't just tell car stories on my channel the way I can on his channel." So, I've done videos about tow trucks and stuff on my channel, but it's a real different thing on his channel because the focus can be on just a car or a car story. So, Johnny Z. Fradley says Johnny Fever reminded me of the WMMS DJs. Yeah, that station's got a huge, huge legacy, WMMS. JP Boileau says, I don't see the value in putting an antique plate on a 1995 Jeep. The regular tags only cost $45 a year. I don't see how it can get any cheaper. I think they can actually get pretty cheap because I think the plate, you can buy it once and renewal's not much. But again, they're assuming you're not driving it much. And if you insure it as an antique plate, quite often the insurance company's going to tell you, by the way, we expect you're not driving it much because it's an antique. And that was my other concern. So when I had my M35, my deuce and a half, that was old enough to be an antique plate if I wanted to. I just got a pickup truck plate on it. And I did that primarily because that truck stood out anywhere I drove it. And I knew darn well if I drove it anywhere, a cop's going to pull me over. Where are you going? So it'd be better just to leave it as was. DePaul says, any thoughts about the rumor that Sirius XM is not going to renew Howard Stern's contract? I listen to him in my truck from time to time. I've not been following that only because that's a rumor that pops up every time his contract is up. So it's one of the things that just goes with the territory. Yeah, Autumn Jeserich says Colorado lets you renew every 5 years for collector plates, but you're only allowed 3,000 miles a year. In Michigan, you put a plate on a trailer, you pay for it one time, and it's permanent. Just stays on the trailer, but you only pay for it one time. And I mean, it makes sense on one level, but on the other hand, if you got a trailer that's on the road like all the time, you'd think they might want some more money. But I'm not going to complain. Stephen Locke says everyone vote for Judge Lehto. I don't want to be a judge. I don't want to be a pirate either. Mexican Specs says Oregon has permanent special interest plates, but do you have to buy a little tag for it each year or not? So now there's a discussion regarding chili and corn. You guys just talk amongst yourselves. Brenda Snow, I love the channel. Chuck Whitehead, you think there'll ever be an EV tag made for EVs? Zach, bye bye booey. Baba booey. Mexican Spec says no renewal is required. 1163562 says I looked into historical plates last year for my 98 Saturn here in Michigan. It's $30 and good for 10 years. Didn't get it because I wasn't sure about the limits. And that's the thing, is that technically they can pull you over. Where are you going? I'll be honest, I've never had anybody call me and say they were harassed, though. I've never heard of anybody being harassed with a historical plate. But theoretically, you could. Daniel Kester. Did Ford or GM dabble into turbine engine cars? Oh, yeah. And they did more than dabble. GM built the whole fleet of cars, the Firebirds 1, 2, and 3. Pretty cool cars. Ford actually built like trucks and buses and stuff. They all experimented with it. Hold on, it jumped on me. David C, was it you or Clark Howard that warned hotels are about to start using AI for room inspections? I did do a video on that, yes. Art asks, why don't you want to be a pirate? Because I don't like their outfits. Lil Bar says Moika, Tuliko, Suomi, Contentia. And I have no idea what that means. I'm guessing, are you asking if I'm of Finnish descent? Yes, if that's the question. I don't know. Our forces keep a box of parts in the car and say you're fixing the car. You can always say you're test driving it. You know, William Page, great to see you, and you, my friend. Obsidian Prime. I used to roll my eyes when you would always talk about not buying an RV. After a couple of years, I'd like to apologize. I'll tell you right now that I've said before, you can buy an RV. You just have to know what you're getting into. And the most common phone call I get is, I just dropped a ton of money on an RV and it's defective. What do I do? And I say, oh, join the club. They're all defective. They're all like that. Well, I paid $150,000 for it and it leaked the first time it rained. Okay. Well, it's not supposed to leak. No, it's under warranty. Right? Take it back. Well, I did, and they said it's going to take 6 weeks. I go, okay. Like, you're not telling me something I've never heard 1,000 times before. So you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And if you don't mind those kinds of things, buy one. I don't care. Ian Gotti, good morning from Eureka, California. Chip Levance, I think a small turbine with an electric hybrid could work. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've done that. They've done that. Six weeks for an RV warranty repair. That's quick. Yeah. Still have the thing in my throat. My windpipe. I wish I used to have a mute button, but it would click, and I didn't like that either. Scott Summers, I saw another YouTube channel where a person bought an RV and they had problems with it. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that going around. The Angry Vet says it's a great channel where a woman sticks it up the RV dealer's orifices for garbage RVs. Yeah, I'm familiar with that one too. I was debating on the language there. Power Up Mike says, I can see myself buying a $15,000 used travel trailer, but never an expensive RV motor coach. Baby Packrat, I'd love an RV, but Steve told me no. Just buy a used one. Buy a used one from somebody else. Let somebody else have all the troubles. Art S is upset that the folding chair is no longer on set, but there is that right there, which is the Italian Hall folding chair. That chair is much older than I am. Standard deviation, would you consider an EV? I would, but not yet. I see myself having one somewhere down the road. I like the idea about not having to pay for gas. That'd be cool. Dum Dum used to work for Passport America, so I'm familiar with RVs. One thing I learned was never to get one. So I was walking through a bookstore and I saw the book RV, like RVs for Dummies, or RV buying for dummies, or RV ownership for dummies. And I took a photograph of the cover and I put it on Twitter and I said, finally, and I wrote chapter 1, you bought an RV, you're a dummy. And I had someone email me and go, Steve, that's hate speech. It's hate speech. Michael Cole says, I love the channel. Wish there'd be more updates on stories. If updates cross my desk, I do the updates. Dan Boyd says, I want to convert a double-decker bus into an RV so I can look down at all the single-story RVs. There are not a lot of double-decker buses in the U.S. Steve, isn't electricity expensive in Michigan, especially in the UP? I believe in the UP it is expensive. Strangely, a couple weeks ago, the entire town of Newberry lost electricity for like a week. Literally, they just announced, like, we will have no electricity for about a week. So, Elliot Polach says, I'm legally blind, so I'm sorry about misspellings and punctuation errors. I'm also an L1 in law school. Where are you going? I've known a couple of very, very good attorneys who are visually impaired. In fact, two of them became judges. And one of the best judges who ever lived was Paul Tyrannus in Wayne County Circuit Court. He was blind. And I had many cases in front of him. I liked getting him as a judge because he was good. And a lot of people assume lawyers are looking for judges who always side with them, which never happens. Never happens. What you want is a judge who's good because it's predictable. It's what's going to happen when you go into a courtroom because they're going to follow the law. And so I always liked being in front of that guy who's one of the most well-prepared judges I've ever seen. So William Page says the price of an RV, you can buy a lot of airline seats and nice hotel rooms at nice places. That's true. Knoxville says he's got my 30-minute stir in of my chili, what I miss. Yes, this show really should just become a cooking show. I am going to do the Lehto slaw episode one of these, but I'm working on really, it's a really deep and long-term joke I'm working on. So give me some time on that, but I'll get there. Aaron James says, what are your thoughts of hiring a former judge that worked at the same courthouse? To do what? To represent you? I'm not sure of any judges that I've ever heard of who became practicing attorneys after they left the bench. I do know several judges who became arbitrators, and I've hired a lot of former judges as arbitrators. Michael Myers is a judge that follows the law as close to a baseball umpire with a constant strike zone. You are correct. And here's the question I have for you. When will baseball wake up and just go to using some kind of machine strike zone? Because I think like making calls on safe and out at first base, you don't need a human to do that. Balls and strikes, they have the technology now, they wanted to, where they could just have something measuring that area and whether or not the ball went through it. I mean, calling balls and strikes by eye is just so, it's not necessary. Sean M., were RVs made better 30 to 40 years ago? Hard to say, but they were less complicated. And that's probably part of it. Kelly Kincaid says they're using automated ball and strike machines in many lower leagues. I've not seen that, but I hope they go to that. Dum Dum says, yeah, but then we wouldn't be allowed to get mad at the umpires. Every sport's got something stupid about it. And in baseball, the stupid thing is that the manager can waddle out there and start yelling at the umpire and kicking dirt on his shoes and kicking dirt on the plate. Now, it's not as absurd as it used to be, but there are some guys like, was it Charlie Weaver, who'd go out there and they throw their hat and they'd get as close as they could to the guy, but without touching him, or occasionally they bump him with the bill of their hat, and then the guy gets thrown out, and then he keeps like kicking dirt like a child. And you're looking at this going, why do they allow this? This is like embarrassingly stupid. And so, the thing is with modern technology and YouTube, you can now see them where they'll say, oh, watch this game where the umpire makes these horrible ball, ball and strike calls. And I've seen that. It's like, oh God. So Johnny Knoxville reminds you, don't forget to tip the disc jockey. I just wanted to say disc jockey. Pulled out my terrestrial pocket radio this week to see what I could tune in. Yeah, I actually flipped around the radio the other day. I was listening to some music on the radio, and I'm like, oof. A lot of stations have changed hands. I'm telling you, something there, something wrong. I made it 1 hour though, almost 50 minutes in. Aaron says Max Scherzer for some odd reason. Steve G, what would you do with Angel Hernandez? Well, it's sad, but visually impaired people need jobs too, so. Yeah, Bob Kerflugen points out that there is no solo cup. No, I literally looked at my watch when my brother was pulling out the driveway, and it's like 5-1. I had to run inside, change, grab my drink, set everything up, and I went live, and I managed to go live, I think, at 1:10. MO Silver, what's your favorite car that you own right now? I've got 5 cars. And it's a toss-up between my Viper and my Cobra. You can't pick a favorite among your children. Situation Money, won't you make a video entitled Never Buy a Powerboat? I think people know that they're buying a powerboat, that it's going to be overly expensive, cost a lot of money to operate, and they probably won't use it as much as they like. Mark Miller says, hey, we've got an awful minor league franchise here. Have you heard of the Rockies? The Rockies? Hey, I don't know. The Tigers are hot, though. Aaron James, if you're looking for an attorney, what qualities and traits in general would you look for? I would look for expertise in an area and also familiarity with the court. People underestimate those two things. People just assume, like, I can just hire an attorney. The same way you can just go to a doctor. And on some levels, depends, but you might be able to for some things. But if you're gonna do a divorce, let's just pick a wacky one, because I don't do divorces. You're gonna get divorced. So you want to find an attorney who does divorce work in the court that your divorce is going to get filed in, and find out how many divorces have they handled there. Because last thing you want is some attorneys walking in front of a judge and has never seen that judge before. There's so much that helps you when you just have that familiarity. Fatty McButterpants, hey, we're live. Univision Tech once has just wanted to pop in and say thank you for all your videos over the years. They've been awesome. Dum Dum says, ever watched the Savannah Bananas? I watched them last night. Kind of like baseball's Globetrotters. I mean, basketballs. Oh, I know. Okay, Globetrotters for baseball. But the Generals sometimes win. Oh, but they've done some things to speed the game up and make it more interesting. And I really do think they're good. It's ingenious what they've done. Daniel Kester says a baseball no-hitter would be boring for me. Well, the thing is, I played baseball as a child. In fact, I actually watched the Little League World Series on ESPN. Right now, I don't care who's playing. To me, that's more fun to watch. I have a blast watching it. But it also reminds me back when I played. So, Elliot Polach, did you see my last 2-part message? No, I didn't. Hang on. Hang on. Oh, I scrolled back. I didn't see it. I'm sorry. It happens. Boomer says, what are your thoughts on some states that want to institute how many miles can be driven each year? They could track it by the mileage recorded when registration or by maybe trackers. I don't like the idea, only because people will be tempted to cheat. They'll roll odometers back. They'll mess with their onboard computers. And but unfortunately, they may have to do something. They got to get the money from somewhere. And so as more and more people buy EVs, there's less and less gas taxes being paid. So road taxes on the gas. So Matthew says, my cousin got divorced and the judge was gay and a cop hater. Didn't go well for him. Was he a cop? It's not good. Janice Ellery's checking in from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Zach, what should I do? My divorce lawyer is in the middle of a divorce of his own. Whoa. Gilbert's in the house, finally. Thank you for checking in, my friend. We've missed you. I haven't seen you in a while either, although I saw you comment on one of my recent videos. So I appreciate that. Aaron James, somebody send this man some lozenges. Yeah, that would probably help. DePaul, 31, back in the 70s, our local Staten Island Little League team won the World Series. I remember that. I kid you not. Carl's Corner says, you want Steve to see your question, pay for the chat option. That would work, but I won't ask for that. And then Tim Nossman says, as a tall man, is the Cobra still comfortable sitting in the Dream Cruise? You know, it's interesting, and I'm glad you asked me that, because I get asked that a lot. People go, how do you fit in that? If you go to Backdraft Racing's website, you can see that they actually offer an option where they lower and lengthen the footwell where the pedals are, so that I can fit in there perfectly, and the pedals are perfectly placed, and I'm as comfortable like you wouldn't believe. Now, the seat moves up and back, so I can let other people drive my car, which I let them do. I've actually let other people drive my Cobra. And the seat's adjustable, but I put the seat all the way back. I fit in there just fine. Absolutely. So Leon Anders, checking from Rochester Hills, didn't see or get to see you at the Dream Cruise yesterday. I was there for about 4 or 5 hours, between 10 and 3, but I was driving the whole time. Jerry DeMoss, Little League's umpiring is horrible. I've seen pretty decent umpiring, and they have replay appeals in Little League, and I've seen a couple calls where they're like, oh, and they fixed them. So I don't think it's that bad. Cyberdoc, are the foot pedals shifted to the left? They are a little bit, not as bad as the Viper. The Vipers are you actually have to get in a mindset when you're driving the Viper to remind yourself to put your feet over. But my Cobra is it's fine. Bob Kerflugen says, you want Steve to see your question, make sure it's mildly interesting. Aaron James, you're a trusting man, letting people drive your Cobra. Well, I'm always in the passenger seat. Mike Myers, nobody drives my vehicle or flies my Cessna 182. Well, I don't let just anybody drive it, but I've let other people drive it. In fact, one of my neighbors is a car guy. We had these great car conversations. And when I got the Cobra, I drove over to his house, took him for a ride, and he's like, "Oh my God, this car is so cool!" And I go, "Do you want to drive it?" And he's like, and he's actually like, "Don't kid with me." I'm like, "No, if you want to drive it, I'll let you drive it. I know you know how to drive a car. I'll be in it with you." It's like, sure. Drove it home. David C says the current plan for an automated ball strike system is for live umpires to make the initial call, and the pitcher, the catcher, or the batter can request an appeal. Why bother though? Like if you've got the system that can measure it, I mean, the only thing you need help on would be like a half swing. Like, did he go? Did he go? And even that's like, those are often real borderline calls. Mustang MG05, on your standard vehicles, do you drive with 2 feet? Yeah, you do the clutch with your left foot. Question is, on an automatic, do you drive with 2 feet? And no, I drive with 1 foot in an automatic. Yeah, Johnny Z. Bradley says Herbie Hancock still owns the 1963 Shelby Cobra he bought brand new, and I think it was like Cobra number 3 or something. Dan Boyd, I don't like others driving my cars, and I don't like driving other people's cars. Well, that's a funny thing. I've got a very good friend who I talk to all the time. And we were talking about my Cobra. He's asking me all about it. And I go, well, I'll let you drive it. He goes, no. I don't want to drive it. I go, no, I'll let you drive it. He goes, no, I don't want to drive it. And I'm like, why? And he's like, what if I wreck it? And I'm like, if that's where your thought goes immediately, I suppose. But, Gilbert, cool, I'll be right over. Come on over, Gilbert. You and I go so far back. Of course I let you drive my car. Gilbert grew up on the same street I grew up on, although we were shifted a little tiny bit. I think we may have overlapped a tiny bit, or we may have figured out that like right around the time my family moved in, her family moved out. Probably unrelated, but you never know. Her parents may have said, well, with that Lehto family in there now, we gotta get out of here. Mind bend, I never learned stick shift. Well, no, my Cobra's got an automatic in it. That's why I don't care. My Cobra, automatic. My Viper, no, I'd never let you drive my Viper. No one drives my Viper. Elliot Polish says, Purdue is where he's studying law. Also, did you know when Amy Comey Barrett still taught law, she had a blind student who didn't get her equipment by day one. And she said, that's my problem now, and took her under her wing. Oh, cool. I had a very good friend who got a PhD from Purdue in philosophy, and he teaches philosophy. So I've been down there a couple of times. Very, very cool. Mexican specs, I've driven 2 feet and automatic when it doesn't want to stay running on its own. Yeah, but the thing is that a properly situated automatic, you should just drive with the 1 foot, unless you plan on never driving a clutch for the rest of your life, because your left foot is your clutch foot. So, the prodigal stranger, I want to drive the Cobra. You want to drive my Can-Am Spider RT? If we ever show up at the same place driving those vehicles, sure. L. McNeil, does the Cobra have a 427? No, it's got a 5-liter, 3rd generation Roush Coyote. So it's all aluminum, and it goes. Gilbert says, I think we moved in 1965 to Southfield, and then we moved to West Bloomfield after the riots. Okay. So my family moved into the house on the street that I think you lived on in 1966. So we just missed each other. What's funny is that you'd moved to Southfield, and then of course the riots you'd been closer to the riots that were coming, but you didn't know that, of course. Jim Rockford, everyone have a blessed day. David, see, I think the problem is the Hertz AI scanner happens after you've turned in the keys. Yes. And there's got to be a method for you to look at something and dispute it with somebody, other than, like I said, you getting the note on your phone when you're halfway to the airport. So, J. Mavier Payne, Lehto, he called me on a Sunday. I was appalled. Huh. J. Mavier Payne, also Lehto, works Sunday posting videos. Okay. And is my posting a video inviting phone calls? I'm not quite sure what the connection is. Robert Torrey, I'm sure the Cobra handles better with a lighter engine. Oh, the Cobra is silly light. It's almost 1,000 pounds lighter than my Viper, but it's got the same horsepower. Oh, boy. Aaron James, I've noticed my area has started installing license plate readers. Do you have an opinion on those? I'm not crazy about the surveillance society in which we're increasingly living. I've seen vehicles on the highway near me. I was driving along not so long ago, and I saw a car pass me. Late model car, obviously a police car, just covered in scanners. And all it's doing is driving around just scanning plates. And I'm sure that if it picks up an expired plate or an outstanding warrant or something, it'll flag it. But, I'm more concerned about the flock cameras that are filming everything. Christian Taylor, is that factual? Always wanted a Cobra. Is what factual? Greg Hansen, always use my left foot for the dimmer. Well, yeah, the dimmer and the clutch. And the e-brake if you had one of the pedals that was on the wall down there. Those are much less common these days. Ginger Cat, do you have any plans on returning to the AACA Museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania? No, I went there for that Tucker event a few years ago. In fact, I wore a Tucker shirt earlier today in a video I shot. Gilbert, when is Dream Cruise weekend? It's right now, and generally speaking, I believe it's the third weekend of August every year, but they announce it a year in advance, so you can always figure out when it's going to be. Leon Anders, can I borrow the Cobra for the weekend? No. Elliot says, have you seen the cars they have driving around Pennsylvania and in Ontario with a camera on top that spins, but it's not a Google Street View? I've not seen that. It's an LE meter maids. Doesn't surprise me that they would come up with something to do that. Lewis Browning says the Dream Cruise next year will be Saturday, August 16th, 2025. Mark Heil, late as usual. Cheers from Surf City, California. Good to see you, my friend. I was late too, so. Elliot will have fun till the lawyer put the Viper away. Gilbert, would you ever turbo the Cobra? I thought you said, would you ever turbo the Cobra? You can actually get a Cobra with a supercharged engine if you don't think you have enough horsepower. JB Weld, can you describe the most annoying client you've ever represented? I can't really do that for a variety of reasons. But I can tell you that what most attorneys complain about when they talk about clients and what they like and don't like about clients is clients who have horribly unrealistic expectations. And so I've had many clients where I've said, here is what I can do for you. Do you want me to do that? Yes. Sign a retainer agreement, go through all this. Halfway through the case, I go, okay, so here's the deal. I told you I could do this. I've got them to offer you this. I advise you to take it because it's what you told me you wanted. I want more now. What do you want? And they tell me something outrageous. I'm like, well, you're not entitled to that. Well, that's what I think I'm entitled to. Okay, but you're not entitled to that. And then I wind up having to argue with them. And it's like, if I knew that you weren't going to take my advice and that you were not willing to settle for what you said you were willing to settle for, I probably wouldn't have taken the case. I've had a client come in and say, I want to hire you. Here's what I want. I go, I can't do that for you. I can't do it. I'm not going to set myself up for failure. I'm not going to disappoint you. How about this? Go find another lawyer. And I've had people call me back and go, I've spoken to 6 other lawyers. They all say the same thing you did. I'm like, okay, can I hire you now? No, I'm sorry. I can't do that. So Baby Packrat says, my husband says that I have unrealistic expectations. You might know. Michael Myers, my wife just said the clients that bother the most are the ones that won't shut up until be quiet. Is she a criminal defense attorney? Because that'd be really bad. Janice Ellery, whining clients. Well, they can whine, and let's face it, they call us, it'll say attorney and counselor because we counsel. So we expect some whining, but Slow down says, would a Cobra with a supercharger get the power to the ground? I think punching that would be like driving on snow. Well, the tires are like this wide, okay? They're like steamrollers. But yeah, you're right. And my friend Mark Lieberman, who's a dealer for Backdraft, he goes, Steve, theoretically, you can order a car with a supercharger, a Cobra, Backdraft replica. He goes, I wouldn't want you to buy one. I go, why not? He goes, you just kill yourself. I'd rather keep you as a client. So, Mike Leah, have you ever been to the car museum in Reno? No, I've heard of it and seen pictures. Cyberdoc says Jackie Chow's worst client was Kramer when he used the bomb. I didn't tell you to use the bomb. Who told you to use the bomb? Go see my doctor, Dr. Bison. New spin. Would it be unethical to drop a client if they won't take an offer you recommend? Not per se, but it might be ethical for you to drop a client if they insisted on pursuing a course of action that was wrong. Like, I don't want any part of this, but Leon Anders, did you catch the cameras in Royal Oak on top of the light post? Yes. There were some extra cameras I noticed down there, and I'm not sure what they're doing down there. Padre, why do you think there's so many bot accounts making comments on YouTube with accounts that lead to NSFW avatars? It's not just my account, by the way, not my channel. It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. You can't stomp them out. You can block them. Doesn't matter. They come right back the next time with something else. So. Michael Myers, she did spend the first 17 years working as a prosecutor. So did she have witnesses who wanted to get all talky? Cyberdoc, does the Cobra track every line in the road? The Cobra handles very, very well and very, very easily. On flat ground, it is straight as an arrow. It is laser straight. And you can actually take your hands off the wheel on flat ground and it'll stay straight like it's on tracks. It's amazing. Giles Bennett, love your channel. Keep up the good work. Thank you. And now my throat feels better, so I just jinxed myself. Matthew, my first car had positive traction. Loved it. Yeah, my first car did too, if you don't count the Gremlin. My 69 Dodge Charger had the Chrysler equivalent, and it was very, very good. Kevin Thomas, did Ed Bolian offer to let you drive his Bugatti? No, he did not, but he took me for a ride in his Lamborghini. I've been for a ride in two of his Lamborghinis. Leon Anders, I took 14 Mile in Greenfield back towards my house to see the Rock House. Greenfield Road dead ends into 14 Mile Road just west of Woodward Avenue. And there was a house that kept getting hit by cars. And I told the story before about towing a vehicle that had missed the rock but hit the house next door. And the rock is still there. You can see it from space. Go to Google Earth View and look up 14 Mile Road and Greenfield, and you'll find it. The birds are free, which is correct. Pleaded or pled are both acceptable. I believe they are both acceptable. I say pled, but I've seen pleaded also. Cyberdocs, I asked about the Cobra tracking because of huge tire size and short wheelbase. Yeah. Daniel Kester, between the Cobra and the Viper, which is more fun in corners? You know, it's hard to say. I've mentioned before, I say this to people and people go like, I don't get it. I like to go through roundabouts at full speed. If a roundabout is open, I love to just go, no slowdown, just through it. And I'm prepared for it, but my passenger's often wedged up against the side. But it happens both in the Viper and the Cobra. Giles Bennett, any trips to the UK plan? Not at this time. I hope to again. I love going overseas and visiting, but it's a question of the time primarily. JB Weld, how many car deer collisions have you been in? 0. I've had a few close calls. I was driving around. So there's 2 big car shows in southeastern Michigan this past weekend. One was the Woodward Dream Cruise, and one's Back to the Bricks in Flint. And there's a bunch of lead ups to the Back to the Bricks. And so I drove up to Flint and was driving around in the Back to the Bricks things in the lead up to the Back to the Bricks. And driving home that evening, I was taking back roads that were paved because I was in my Cobra. And I was seeing deer. I saw deer like literally on the shoulder of the road, just kind of like standing there. And yeah, you got to be real careful. Wade Pittenger, remember the 60s and 70s Mopar starter whine sound? Yes, it had a reduction gear, like a step up gear, and it wound up and it engaged. When it unwound, you got to know that sound. I had one in my Charger, so. Leon Anders says he had a deer run into his truck. Well, I had a deer bump into my Jeep, but it didn't damage anything. It kind of startled the deer, but I don't count that as a collision. Andy H. in the early 80s, a professor named Lehto that taught at OCC in Wayne State. Any relation? Not that I'm aware of, no. Was he an attorney or just a professor? Because I know an attorney named Neil Lehto and another attorney named Michael Lehto. And I've talked to both of them, and we can't see any relation that we know of. Steve says you can make a legal U-turn in a roundabout if you think about it. You can just go in and do circles all day long if you want to. Yeah, Terrell Cochran says the roundabouts in Traverse City are designed to slow you down. They've got a small S curve leading into them. Lewis Browning says, I believe that's the address of the Rock House, 1205 West 14 Mile Road, Birmingham, Michigan, 48009. Mr. Mamor, what's the longest you've been able to drive the Viper in one trip? I drove it to Copper Harbor, and yeah, so I mean that's 500 or 600 miles. That was a blast. People complain. They go, "Oh, Steve, that car's not going to be comfortable." I was just fine. Oh, Andy H. the professor is a female. I need to know what they taught and possibly a first name, but yeah, Zach Larson, did you hear about the Ford worker whose wallet was returned to him after being lost under the hood of someone's car for 10 years? Yes. I didn't do a video. I'm not sure how interesting that is for what I do. But a mechanic was working on a car, a 10-year-old Ford, got inside the engine and found a guy's wallet laying there. It'd been there the entire time. Pulled it out and goes, weird, and does some research, and he tracks the guy down who was a line worker at Ford at one of the plants in Michigan. And I saw an interview and he said that he had taken the wallet out of his pants because he was wearing sweats, I think. And so he put it in his shirt pocket and he's assembling these cars coming down the assembly line. And somewhere along the line, he realized his wallet was missing, but he didn't know where it went. And apparently it was just in this other guy's engine for the longest time. And it got returned to him with the money still in it. Belio says, yeah, you can really see that rock on Google Earth. That's a big rock. Yeah, like I said, you can see it from space. Manuel Guerra says, I just entered Ohio. 75 southbound is a mess. Oh, yeah. I went through Ohio a couple months ago. Both ways, it was a mess. Johan Ogren says, are there any thoughts on the truck that killed 3 on the interstate? You're talking about the U-turn down in Florida? You know, I often talk about truck drivers, and I've got a lot of truck drivers in my audience. And trucking is so important to our economy. And truck driving as a profession is something that most people don't think often enough about, because everything you buy ever was moved by a truck sometime, someplace, somewhere. And so most truck drivers, listen carefully, most truck drivers are extremely skilled, underpaid, underappreciated, and without them, the country would grind to a halt. And every now and then, you hear about somebody screwing up like that, and you're like, well, unbelievable, unbelievable. So, Yeah, Steve says Cincinnati is always a mess if you're on I-75 trying to get through Ohio. So Fatty Butterpants says, but can you see the satellite from the rock? Well, presumably, yes. Light goes both ways, right? DePaul says, if you brought it, excuse me, if you bought it, a trucker brought it. And that is so true. Aaron James, when filing suit for damages, seeking monetary compensation to be made whole. How do attorneys feel about agreements on their fee being a percentage of the awarded amount? Well, that's a contingency agreement. And a contingency agreement usually standard is 1/3. So the costs get deducted and then 1/3 goes to the attorney as an attorney fee. That's often negotiable. Some places it's higher than 33. I've heard of people use 45. And it just depends, so Fatty Butterpants is driving a truck is not an easy job. No, especially when you realize that a lot of truck drivers drive the truck there and then have to offload what they've got on board and then load something else on and then drive it someplace. And I hate to say it, they got to put up with civilians who don't know how to drive. So a truck driver is taking a load from Michigan to California, and somewhere along the line, he encounters some idiot who's talking on their phone, drinking their coffee, doing their makeup, reading the paper. And where they're going, don't know. Where that truck is going, it's important. So Andy H says the professor's first name may have been Carol, and she taught history. Yeah, I don't know any Carol Lehto, sorry. John Michael Karma says the Florida truck driver that caused the accident was from another country and crossed illegally into the country a while back, which makes you wonder. So Glenn Lego says, I'm awestruck by truckers backing into a dock, especially they have to back into an alley to get to the dock. I've seen some guys who could thread a needle with their truck. I've watched that and I'm like, and I've known a couple of truck drivers personally. I've had clients who are truck drivers, so I've talked to a lot of people. Tim Nossum says truck drivers are like doctors and police officers and pilots. You only hear about the bad ones, not the millions doing it right daily. And I get grief for saying that there are good police officers out there. We'll never agree on that one particular, in the sense that I always say there are good police officers out there. The bad ones make the news. Same with lawyers. People go, oh, all lawyers are horrible. Did you hear about that one guy? That one guy's not all lawyers, Janice Ellery says 40% in my area for personal injury cases. But if you had a slam dunk case for $1 million, you don't think an attorney would go to 35? Most people don't ask. William Page, remove 18-wheelers from the road and we all die hungry in the dark. That's a great way to put it. Jay Klein, I-75 in Cincinnati has been under construction for a decade. That's about right, too. Leon Anders had a deer run into his truck when he was sitting at the light at Hamlin and John R. I can picture that intersection right now, and that's not the kind of place I'd expect a deer to be out gallivanting around. Tom says that area may have been under construction for 2 decades. Johnny Knoxville, who is going to be the peacemaker here, says it's always best to stay away from religion and politics. My neighbor is the opposite political affiliation as me, and I'm inviting her over for chili tonight. Unite, not divide us. Home front Forge to 75 in Dayton forever. Randy Riegel says a law office in Pittsburgh that advertises only 25%. Manuel Guerra, how many videos did you record with Ed this time? I think 10 or 11. The Aussie 1970 points out you should never park your convertible next to a truck carrying cattle. They can let go anytime. Oh boy. That's the one I see a truck going on the road that's carrying cattle. And I always think, wow, that's I mean, every time you hit your brakes, don't you feel sorry for the animals inside bouncing around? So Deanne Boyd says Ohio should just give up on paved roads. Oh. Home front forge. Do you hear about the proposed I-73 project to run from southeast Ohio to Detroit? I think I saw a headline about them considering some new road to cut through Ohio. So we'll see. Pa Rump Mike, thank you for promoting the IG. I get a great feeling when they or we win an important case. I can tell you right now that I have people ask me about, Steve, do you ever, write threatening letters as an attorney? Now I would say, no. If you've got a case, we'll just file a lawsuit. That's usually how you get the fastest results. And yet the IJ wrote a threatening letter on behalf of that family that had the flock camera aimed at their house. And the city had already told that guy, no, we're not going to move that. Sorry. The IJ wrote a letter and explained why they need to move it, and they moved it. So they're willing to send a letter like that, but I guarantee you somebody on that council looked them up and said, ooh, these people go to the Supreme Court on cases like this. Maybe we should revisit this. And they did. Lucky Leprechaun, would you rather haul bulls or chickens? I'm not cut out to be a truck driver. I couldn't do it. That's why I respect people who can. I am one of these people where I will not criticize your job if it's a job that I would not do myself. And I don't think I could do it. I wouldn't have the temperament. I'd be wanting to kill people on day one. I know I would. Mustang MG05 Bay City is considering putting those cameras up. Flock cameras? Oh boy. Mike Lee, a fireman? You mean like as a job? Again, it's not a job I would want. It's a necessary job. When somebody does that, and here's the thing. Think about this. Your house catches on fire, your building catches on fire, whatever it is. Everybody else is running out of the building and they're running towards it. Lion Zookeepers is the IJ is putting lawyers as a whole in a positive light. Yes, they are. And they argued a case in Michigan. So I went and saw them, and I was a keynote speaker for an event they did in California a couple years ago. I met a bunch of them. I met Scott Bullock, the president. I met a bunch of these attorneys, great guys. And they said, "Hey, we're going to be doing a Supreme Court argument in Michigan before the Michigan Supreme Court. Would you like to attend?" I said, "Yes." And it was actually held off-site, believe it or not. And I went and saw this argument, and their attorney who I'd met before, I got to see him in action, and he was so good, young guy. And I walked up afterwards. I said, I want to let you know, I've watched arguments before. I've argued cases before in courts of appeal, and I filed cases with the Michigan Supreme Court. I've done all this stuff. I said I was blown away by how good you are. And he's like, "Oh, thank you." He's very, 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 modest about it. He was good. He was good. So they are extremely good attorneys. And they're also really, really good at finding cases that deserve their attention. And they do a good job with them. Keith Donaldson, yesterday's radio story was as good as it gets. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Have you seen Peter Santinello's latest Michigan videos? No, I have not. Somebody asked about that at the top, and I apologize. Several people have sent me the link. I will watch it. I'd never heard of him before, but I guess he spent time in the Copper Country in the UP, and he talks to Finns up there, which is pretty cool. So I'll check it out. Also, I had several people send me a note about the guy, Simon. He's British, who has a channel. I think it's called Today I Learned, maybe, or something. I'm not sure. He did a video on the Italian Hall disaster where he got almost all the facts right, which is mind-blowing, or mind-boggling. Take your pick. And I was impressed that because most stuff on the internet gets everything wrong. Scott Rogers stopped by Lehto's in St. Ignace a few weeks ago, and so did I. And I mentioned this on Facebook recently because I actually said to the woman behind the counter, "My name is Lehto," and I said, "And I get asked about you guys all the time." And she goes, "Wait, you're the guy from YouTube?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "We get asked about you all the time." Okay. Oh, boy. In and out or in out. Speaking of attorneys, I've dealt with many who seem to talk fluently in their offices. When they appear before a judge, they suddenly become tongue-tied and incoherent. Any thoughts? Some people are bad at public speaking. I don't know what else to tell you. I've seen attorneys who are so good in court, and I've seen attorneys who were not. And you cannot tell by speaking to them outside of court. It's the craziest thing. Lucky Leprechaun, have you seen a Viper with a twin turbo straight six? No, I have not. I can't really talk about it. Cody Prine says Simon Whistler. Simon Whistler. Birds are free. Simon Whistler. Donald Kester. Simon Whistler. Tom, is that a phone? Fido says the false fire that killed those children. Well, that's what I wrote the book about. Tigerman99515 says the In-N-Out lady is moving to Tennessee. One of there'll be burger joints there. You know, it's funny because In-N-Out, I love that chain, but there aren't any in Michigan yet. And it's a family-owned, the woman who now owns it, company. And she's expanding very, very slowly. And so the problem is there aren't any in Michigan yet. So she said that she's going to move east. We're hoping that'll cause her to spin it along, Jason Kjellberg says Simon's writers are all pretty good with their fact checking. Yeah, I sent him a note. He never responded, but I was kind of curious because he got most of the story very, very well done. And there was one glaring error that I was going to point out to him, but he never wrote me back. But it's not that important. It's just funny to somebody who knows the story as well as I do. So Mark Miller was not impressed with In-N-Out. Okay, well, not everybody agrees on everything. Fatty McButterpants says the In-N-Out lady in my town is actually in a different profession. Lion Zookeeper says he stopped in at Lehto's Pasties last year and asked the man working there if he knew about you and any relation. And he responded, "I wish. We watch his videos all the time." Oh boy. Grande Taco says their fries are a bit soggy. Well, it's kind of like Five Guys. Five Guys, if you order fries, they give you a sack of fries. It's insane how much they give you. Now the Five Guys fries are pretty good, but the thing about In and Out, I think that I personally like the flavor of the meat in the meat patties. Chief FC, please do tell what Simon's people got wrong. It's going to sound nitpicky, but like I said, it's just somebody who knows the story so well. But there was a guy named Huta, John Huta, who was accused of a crime during the strike. And most historians think that he was framed. He didn't actually do it, but he was found guilty. So I'll grant you that. But John Huda was accused of and put on trial for committing a crime by himself. And in the video, Simon says that the crime was committed by the Huta brothers. Never heard of a brother of John Huda, just Huta. So don't know who the Huta brothers may or may not have been, but what are you going to do? The dude, hey Steve, film student watching from Norway. Love your videos about Hertz. Thank you for checking in from Norway. Lewis Browning, the Bayless Public Library. Is that an answer to a question, or where is Bayless? Is that up north someplace? Rings a bell. Is that the one in Sault Ste. Marie where I talked about the Italian hall disaster? Tigerman99515 says In and Out reminds me of the original McDonald's, especially the fries when they would dice them by hand. There's a guy in not Engadine, Nobbin Way along US 2, move in fries, and they actually they put the potato in and slice them right there, and you are getting the fries 5 minutes after it was a potato. They're so good. They're so good. Now, Gilbert's is the Hunter House. The Hunter House is on Woodward Avenue. I drove by it 10 times yesterday. Those are basic sliders, but it's an independent place like White Castle. Jay Klein says Simon got dragged in the comments of that video for what he got wrong. Really? I'll have to go back and look because I did not see anything in the comments indicating that. Oh, the birds are free. Culver's butter burgers and cheese curds are better than any. I never had the cheese curds, but I've had the butter burgers. They are good also. Culver's is kind of like a Midwest In and Out in that sense. Mike Leas' In and Out cuts the fresh potatoes as well. That wouldn't surprise me. Last time I went to In and Out, the line went like it wound around the block like a clock spring. So I Daniel Kester says technically fries don't have grease in them, it's oil. It's a term of art. Oh, Cyberdoc lard. Tim Noss in Michigan had the best carnival French fries, the ones that made brown bags transparent. Power up, Mike. What is your hat size? I unfortunately have got to take a hat and let it out, get an adjustable, let it out all the way, and then it barely fits on because I got a weird bump on the back of my head. More information than you needed, but that's why I don't wear a lot of hats, literally. Bob Kerflugen, I appreciated the Milan Speedway shirt you wore in a recent video. I lived there for a couple of years. I've got two of their shirts. I pick them up at the Autorama every year, and I like to support the local drag strip. Jay Klein, I suggested that Simon read your book, then remake the video. It wasn't that. Like I said, I thought the video was very good. I really did. It's just that there were a couple things about it, and I really wish. And here's the thing: there's a documentary called Red Metal that was put out. It was put out on PBS a few years ago. And occasionally, you can find it on YouTube. Not always, but you can find it there. And the producer of the documentary contacted me and said, "I want you in my documentary." I said, "I want to be in your documentary because I want to get the story told properly." And we talked all about the Italian Hall disaster, and I sat for interviews with him, and I worked on it. And at one point in time, he sent me, in essence, the transcript of what the documentary would look like, but the script was made later. But all the interviews and all the stuff, and then the narration was in there, and it had not been narrated yet. And I called him up, good friend of mine. I said, "Hey, look, I know you hate this." I said, "But you're the producer, but I'm the expert on this. And there's one or two things here that you want to tweak just a little bit." And he said, "What are they?" And I told him, he said, "Okay." And he fixed them all. But I've also talked to people who say, "Yeah, we made the offer, like, if you want to help us," and they want to start changing stuff. And I understand that if they shot an interview with some guy and he said something, they can't go and reshoot all the interviews. But the point is that the guy wanted to have it accurate. I wish somebody doing something about the Italian Hall disaster would contact me and go, "Steve, can you take a look at this and let me know?" And I've got another friend of mine who wrote a book about a tangential topic, not the Italian Hall disaster, but something related to the strike. And he actually sent me the manuscript and said, "Steve, I'm interested in your thoughts." And I went through and I pointed out a couple things, and he called me and he goes, "I agree with you on some of these, but not all of them." I said, "We're free to disagree." I said, "I can't say that you are wrong. I just think that this is correct. And I think what you've got there is less correct." But my friend, when he wrote the book, actually put a footnote and he said, "I've printed this. Steve Lehto thinks this." I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. And so the weird part is, I've talked to some people who have written stuff or done videos or whatever on topics that I know a lot about, and they are so wildly wrong. And I'm looking at it going like, but the problem is, you can't fix the world. You can't. So Lewis Browning says the documentary is called "The Tragedy That Silenced a Small Michigan Town, Into the Shadows." Yeah, it's an odd title for the story too, because the town wasn't small when it happened. It was one of the biggest towns in Michigan at the time. But that's a judgment call. So I pity the fool. Steve, you often talk about the best vehicles. What's your most hated vehicle? Um, I've 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 always enjoyed picking on the Pontiac Aztec. It's an ugly car. It's an ugly car. Brad M73, is there ever an instance where rent to own is a good idea? Well, rent to own is often dangerous because the stuff is usually grossly overpriced to build in the fact that so many people default on the rentals. So, if you're desperate and you need a refrigerator and it's the only way you can buy one, maybe do it, but I'd go looking for a used one first. Ella Thea, since you brought it up, I would like more information on the weird bump on the back of your head. I assume it's an alien implant. Andrew Q, what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that my show started 10 minutes late and we're done in 10 minutes. So there you go. Cyberdoc -5 and counting. No. I'm going to go over 10 so we can do 2 hours. So we'll always do that. Mike Leah, sometimes you just have to let them be wrong. Well, one of the things I like to point out to people is that this idea of the marketplace of ideas will eventually correct itself. When I first wrote my book on the Italian Hall disaster, it's called Death's Door. I pointed out that the historical marker on the site had a mistake in it. Book got published, and the state of Michigan, one of their representatives came to me and said, Steve, what's wrong with it? I told them. They said, well, we'll change it if it's actually wrong. Convince me. So I wrote a report explaining why it's wrong, and they came back and said, oh, you're right. It's wrong. And they fixed it. And they actually called me and said, would you like to rewrite it? We'll let you write the language. So I wrote the language. And they, committees and all kinds of other stuff. But eventually, they remade the sign using language I wrote. And if you'd said to me, Steve, you're going to write a book, and not only will people read the book, but the state of Michigan will change a historical marker because of you, I'd be like, no, that's not how that works. Turns out it works. So the marker got changed. And so some misinformation on the old marker is not being spread anymore. Well, it's on the marker. It must be true. And, it's one little bit at a time. But I'm actually thinking someday of writing a book about everything that happened to me regarding the book that I wrote on the Italian Hall disaster, because I've had so many crazy stories. I've had a professor plagiarize portions of my book. I've had another author plagiarize portions of my book with a different publisher. I've had people come and heckle me to the point where they had to be hauled up by security. I've had people who showed up at my talks drunk, screaming at me. They had to be removed. Who'd have thought? I thought we'd never, nothing but a dull moment. No. It's actually interesting. And by the way, when I caught the one professor who plagiarized my work, I complained to the publisher and said, "Hey, that's my work being plagiarized." And they said, "Well, it's not a copyright violation because they didn't plagiarize enough." I said, "Yeah, but it's unethical to not acknowledge that it's plagiarized." And they said, "Ethics? What are you talking about? We're a publisher." I said, "Fine, scholarly." They go, "We're not a scholarly publisher." Tim Nossum, did copper mining use Chinese immigrants? No. The primary immigrants were Finns and Croatians. And there's a bunch of different countries that a lot of them came from in Central and Southeastern Europe. And they didn't care if you spoke English. They didn't care. Just come on up and get a job, and they'll put you to work. So Steve says the Scion is the ugliest vehicle. Okay. Well, Dimebag Coins, hey, thanks for all the work. Never miss a story. I appreciate that. Idris Taylor, I mentioned your book on Simon Whistler's video. Well, I actually sent him an email and said, I've written extensively on the topic. If you want to copy my book, let me know and I'll send you one. I thought the offer of a free book might get me past whoever his gatekeeper is, but that didn't happen. Andrew Q, the Italian Hall disaster was a crowd crush caused by a false cry of fire. Someone yelled fire. There was no fire. Steve says, didn't someone question your experience in the matter? I bet there's only a handful of experts. Well, I've had people argue with me about it, but the funny thing is that it's one thing to say, I just simply don't believe something. But when somebody has studied it and actually has just laid out the case for it and said, here's the case for it, I still don't believe it. You're wrong. No, you don't believe it, but I'm not wrong. And there's a difference. There's a difference. So, Cody Prine, hey, hit that like button. Retired Butcher Boy, got to run. Thank you. Hey, my throat's feeling really good finally. Oh, boy. Sometimes I listen to myself. Thanks for all of your time and knowledge. Oh, and knowledge that you share with us. Oh, and by the way, thank you for the kind note. Sometimes I listen to myself. Sent me a kind note. Jay Klein says Simon doesn't write the stories. Oh no, I know he's clearly got writers and producers and all that stuff. I understand that. That's why I didn't blame him. Like I said, there was a mistake that somebody made, but it was so far from this actual story itself that it's so minor. Grande Taco, it's been 100 years and people are still emotional enough to yell at you about your book. It's been 112 years, and yes, yes, yes. There's I got to be careful. There is a guy who's a very, very well-known loudmouth in that area who disagrees with me on several of my positions, and he's the one who showed up drunk at a library and started yelling at me. And the funny thing is, I later, about a month later, went up and I was visiting the area for something else. And I saw somebody walking a puppy, a Sheltie puppy. And of course, I love Shelties. So I got out of my car and I walk up, excuse me. I said, is that a Sheltie? Yes, it is. Oh my God, I love Shelties. I had 2 Shelties. I said, is it okay if I engage with your puppy? Yeah, absolutely. So I kneel down, I'm petting this Sheltie puppy, and the woman goes, you're Steve Lehto. And I said, yes, I am. And she said, I am so sorry for what happened to you at the library. And I said, were you there? And she goes, yes, I was. And she told me the guy's name. She goes, everybody knows him. He's like that. I am so sorry. I said, well, it's not your fault. I appreciate it. I said, it didn't hurt anything. I go, it's just kind of annoying. And she goes, no, no, no. She goes, everybody up here hates him. Which, by the way, is a fact. Everybody does, in fact, hate that man. So Daniel Kester says, I hope everybody's got a good week coming up. So do I. Johnny Knoxville says Shelties are the Lassie dog. Well, they're smaller though. Lassie was a collie, and a collie is a larger dog than a Sheltie, but they're very related. Yeah, Dum Dum says they're mini Lassies. They're mini Lassies. Codemeister Beats says here at the VA and NC State line, a popular produce place, they have little handcrafted and painted doodad decorations made by the Lehto family. Probably no relation. Yeah, I don't know anybody in the family who makes doodads. Tim Nossum says he's probably the same guy who skipped the $4 toll last week. Yeah, no, the guy that skipped the $4 toll is young. He was like in his 20s, I think. Which makes me wonder, is the guy really just trying to save $4? Don't know. Tom Riddle, is Michigan going to have a better college football season this year? You know, probably, but I don't even care. I can coast on that national championship they got. And that, by the way, the NCAA handed down their punishment the other day. And it's a big fine, but they get to keep all their wins. So that's all I care about. Papanat, what about widgets? What about them? Is it like a doodad? SKS Hugo had a Sheltie, but he says it wasn't too smart. I had 2 Shelties, extremely smart animals, but I knew people who had Shelties that weren't too bright. I think it's like any other animal. Lucky Leprechaun and others are debating whether the dog that played Lassie was a female or a male. I believe it was played by both. I believe that it was played by more than one dog. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Tom Rogers and Padre, yeah, it's a whatchamacallit. Wasn't there a candy called a whatchamacallit? Oh boy. The birds are free. My parents' 60th anniversary is this week. Congratulations. I have the utmost respect for anybody who can put up numbers like that. Daniel Kester says there have been about a dozen dogs playing Lassie. 9 of them have been male. Yeah, with a big long-haired dog like that, you can't really tell from a distance. Sometimes I listen to myself, says the Wolverines do have the best helmet design in football, and I agree wholeheartedly. Although there are other teams, I think Delaware uses a winged helmet also, but I'm pretty sure the Wolverines did it first. So, oh boy. Yeah, Dum Dum says Mr. Ed is better than Lassie. Oh boy. David C says Lassie's stunt double was a Belgian shepherd wearing a wig. Standard deviation. How many flippers were there? Well, could you really tell the difference? I mean, come on. Oh boy. Alethea's checking out later. Bye for now. Yeah, it's getting kind of late over there, guess, right? Aaron Freeman, your face is out of phase with your voice. Well, it's in phase on my monitor, but of course, what happens to it once it enters the pipes that are the internet, I have no idea. Homefront Forge, they charge both ways on the bridge. What's the toll now? For a standard vehicle, it is $4. And yes, they charge both ways, but all the toll booths are at the north end. So whether you're entering or exiting at the north end is where you pay $4. Tigerman99515, how long did your Shelties live? 15 and 16, I believe. I have to go back and check the math, but quite long lived. But I got them offset. I had Milo first, about a year and a half, and then Wolfie. And Wolfie outlived Milo. So I had Milo for a while at the front end by himself, and Wolfie for a while at the tail end by himself. And Wolfie passed away in 2017 in February. And I've not had a dog since then. Don't plan on getting another one. I might change my mind somewhere down the road, but not right now. Cody Prine says if you're out of sync with the visual audio, you simply adjust your flux capacitor. I think you just simply whack it. I think you just whack it. Carl's Corner does remind us that the bridge, the Mackinac Bridge, is 5 miles long, and that is a key fact. 5 miles. Now it's not 5 miles over water. There's a ramp at both ends, but it is 5 miles in total length. Aldo Leva, hey Steve, greetings from sunny Mexico. Sunny Mexico. Wild Eyed Wanderer, we paid $5 for the month or the holidays. But did you have a trailer, for instance? Some things are different, but I just know a standard car, $4. Silver Cab, what kind of bicycle did you have as a child? At first, I had a Stingray, no speeds. Later, I had a Schwinn with a 5-speed shifter on the top tube. And then I had a 10-speed, eventually a Schwinn Varsity. And then I had a Raleigh Grand Prix, which is also a 10-speed. I rode that thing everywhere. I guarantee I put thousands of miles on that bicycle. And then now, for instance, I've got a full suspension Haro, which cost more than my first 2 cars combined, with push button shifters and disc brakes. So, Andrew Q, did Milo and Wolfie ever appear in your videos? A couple early videos, they're walking around in the background. I'm not sure if they're still online or not. I took a lot of the old videos down. I did put up a video or two where I found some footage of the two of them playing, but they're not very elaborate videos. I did not have a lot of video of them, and I feel bad. I got tons of photographs. Lucky Leprechaun, now you're gesturing with your hands, which I do a lot. Are you part Italian? No, Lehto is Finnish from Finland. And now you retracted the message as I answered it. No, it's Finnish from Finland. Oh, boy. Somebody says, get a cat. Sadly, I am allergic to cats. Janice Ellery, I'm deathly allergic to cats. Very, very allergic. Tom says it's $2 per axle for passenger vehicles, would be $4 a car. $5 per axle for motor homes and commercial vehicles. And I know I've taken a trailer across, and I forgot what the trailer cost. That bumped it to $6 or something. I don't know. All I know is I have a Mac Pass, which means I pull up and the arm just goes up. John Michael Karma had a Varsity, then a Continental with center pull brakes. Yes. because those side pulls weren't as accurate as you'd like. But yeah, I remember talking about that kind of stuff like it mattered back in the day. Center pull brakes, yes. But like I said, my current bike has got hydraulic disc brakes, which are more complicated than anything I had in a bike back in the day. Carl's Corner, any of those bikes have a banana seat? Well, yeah, the two Stingrays did. The single speed and the 5-speed both had banana seats. Neither of them had sissy bars, though. Douglas Gaxiola had a Schwinn Varsity back in 1978. That's about when I had my Raleigh Grand Prix. Carl's Corner, why does it say per axle? But if you have dualies, it costs more. I don't know how that works. I don't know. Tiger Man 99515 out of here all. Great being here. Thanks. And we've now been doing this for 2 hours. Now my throat's getting me again. Rex Foucher will get the last word. Varsity, 65 pounds of fun. Now, I'll admit, my first mountain bike was extremely light, but it was also no suspension, zero. As they become suspended with disc brakes, they start getting heavier again. So my bikes that were the lightest bikes I ever owned were probably my Raleigh Grand Prix and then my first mountain bike. But the Varsity, it's like it was made out of solid bars of iron, not tubes. So there you go. Thanks, everybody. Had a great time. Glad we could get together finally. And I will try to be back next week. I think I'm looking at my calendar. I think I'll be here next week. But again, I try my hardest. But I had a great time. Hope you did too. I'll talk to you later. And check me out during the week. As always, on my main channel, Fridays, and also occasionally other times on my backup. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.